Welcome to Life Transformation, a weekly podcast from Sonrise Church in Surrey, British Columbia. Stay tuned to hear inspiring messages and teachings, giving you hope and purpose, leading you to a life-changing relationship with Jesus as you follow Him.
You know, but this morning we come to this morning full of feels and emotions. You know, we're still early enough in the new year to say Happy New Year, to greet each other with a Happy New Year. But for some of us, it's not so happy. Some of us, we're just really struggling to survive and barely get by. In our prophetic Discovery class this week, we shared kind of our expectation for 2022. And even in the expectation of better things, it comes on the tail of hard things that we have had to go through for the last couple of years. You know, maybe you've lost someone, maybe they've passed away, or maybe the relationship has been severed because of viewpoints. You know, maybe you're sick. Pastor Chris, we prayed. Maybe you're praying for someone who is sick and they need a miracle. They need a prayer. You know, maybe even just the situation in the world brings you to tears. Or, you know what, perhaps the emotions aren't all bad. Maybe like Nick and Rochelle, you welcomed a baby or you have a new grandchild, that these are tears of joy, of tears of celebration. Maybe I don't know if you saw on Facebook, Pastor Sherry, she had requested some support for Peace Arch Church because Peace Arch Hospital. They are considering closing the labor and delivery ward. And she was overwhelmed by the support that we showed her, that the community showed. You know, so there's just a lot of emotions. And the beauty in today's text is that God understands tears. John relates to God by weeping before the throne. And we see in the text how God answers tears. Now, normally I actually like to begin a sermon, a preach with a joke and a laugh. Today I don't have a joke to share with you, but I do have a true story. So the text actually often brings me to tears. So for the last 2 years, as I've been meditating on Revelation 4 and 5 and just the scene, it just gets me all the feels. And so I was at staff meeting and we were worshiping as we do every week, and tears were just streaming down my face as I envisioned King Jesus on the throne. Now it was Terrific Tuesday. Terrific Tuesday is the first Tuesday of the month where we dress up. And, you know, ever since I was a little girl, I've hated pantyhose and stockings, leotards. I just find them so uncomfortable, but, you know, fashion is pain. So it happened to be Terrific Tuesday. So I'm wearing my pantyhose and Spanx, because, you know, ladies, you gotta keep it all in. And apparently that combination put a sour look on my face. So to the untrained male eye, that looks like an anguished soul. So after the meeting, I get a very thoughtful and concerned call from Pastor Chris, who wanted to know if I was all right or if I needed to talk. And now, ladies, there are just some things you don't want to admit to your pastor, am I right? No, I did it. So I left the Spanx at home in favor of something a little bit more comfortable. I do have my preaching shoes on. But if there's going to be tears this morning, let them be tears of awe and holy reverence. Hebrews 4:16 invites us to come to the throne boldly. So let's do that, even if it means we bring our tears. Let's read Revelation 5. I'm just actually going to be reading from the Passion Translation. And I saw the one seated on the throne was holding in his right hand an unopened scroll with writing on the inside and on the outside, and it was sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw an incredibly powerful angel proclaiming with a great loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its 7 seals?" But no one was found, living or dead, in all of creation. No one was worthy to open the scroll and read its contents, so I broke down weeping with intense sorrow because there was found no one worthy to break open the scroll and read its contents. Then one of the elders said to me, "Stop weeping, look, the mighty Lion of Judah's tribe, the Root of David, he has conquered. He is worthy. He is the worthy one who can open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a young lamb standing in the middle of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders. He appeared to have been slaughtered, but was now alive. He had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to the ends of the earth. And I saw the young lamb approach the throne and receive the scroll from the right hand of the one who sat there. And when the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures saw the lamb had taken the scroll, they fell down at the feet of the lamb and worshiped him. Each one of them had a harp and golden bowls brimming full of sweet incense, which are the prayers of God's holy lovers. And they were all singing this new song of praise to the Lamb. "Because you were slaughtered for us, you are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals. Your blood was the price paid to redeem us. You purchased us to bring us to God out of every tribe, language, people group, and nation. You have chosen us to serve our God and formed us into a kingdom of priests who reign on the earth." Then I looked and I heard the voices of myriads of angels in circles around the throne, as well as the voices of the living creatures and the elders, myriads and myriads. And as I watched, all of them were singing with thunderous voices, "Worthy is Christ the Lamb who was slaughtered to receive great power and might and wealth and wisdom and glory and honor and praise." And then every living being joined the angelic choir. Every creature in heaven and on earth, under the earth and in the sea, and everything in them were worshiping with one voice, saying, "Praise, honor, glory, and dominion be to God enthroned and to Christ the Lamb forever and ever." And then the 4 living creatures responded, "Amen." And the 24 elders threw themselves face down to the ground and worshiped. Jesus, we just come before you humbly to the throne with boldness, though, and we bring everything we are to worship you. I ask that you would give to us a vision of King Jesus on the throne, that we would see you as you truly are, that we would enter into worship, that our whole being would worship you because you are worthy. Thank you, amen. You know, I wouldn't mind at all if we skipped to the good part and where we simply received the reading of the word and then went back into worship. I love how Pastor Chris has opted to interrupt the flow of our normal service or normal schedule, putting an emphasis on the worship instead of camping around a sermon, as if I could say anything that would be better than the vision of Jesus. But I do have my preaching shoes on. So we'll spend a little bit of time reflecting back to go forward. For 400 years, you know, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. They didn't know God. Perhaps they'd heard about God, but they didn't know God. They didn't really truly know God. They were treated badly as slaves by the Egyptians, and they cried. The scripture actually does not say that they cried out to God. They cried, they whined. Now, I suspect that they were actually probably crying out to perhaps even one of the Egyptian gods. They lived amongst the Egyptians in a polytheistic environment and culture, and so God would have been just one of the gods. But so they whined and they cried, but it wasn't necessarily to God, but God. They were God's people, and he heard them, and he turned toward them. Now, when God turns toward something or someone, it always means he's about to do a thing. And God looked upon the children of Israel and God acknowledged them. It says Exodus 2:25. And an invitation to worship God is an invitation to know him, and to know God is to worship him. When God called Moses, he answered him and said, I will be with you, and this is the sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people up out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. God showed up. He saved the people. He brought them to the place where they would worship. They were grateful. They worshiped. And it was said of them among the nations that they never pursued anyone else. The end. But no, that's not what happened. The people rejected God. They did not want to worship. They did not want to know God. Now, all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood far off. But Moses, he drew near into the thickness where God was. You know, the result of not knowing God is sobering. It says in Romans 1, they did not glorify him as God and changed the glory of the incorruptible God to the image of a man corruptible, who exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature instead of the Creator, who is blessed forever. You know, that there is so much more I'd like to say about this, but we're on our way to the throne room, so I won't stop right here, but I just want to highlight two things in this text that I think is important for our morning. You know, at that moment, at the mountain of the Lord, at the moment, the Israelites did not understand the assignment. The people received what they could as slaves, which was the law. But Moses, he was raised in the palace. He received. And what does it say about him? It says, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Sometimes we need to break off that we're no longer slaves before we can come in and be able to worship, right? So the Israelites' response actually might hit a little close to home. It has for me many times, but fast forward to the throne room vision that John sees, and he already sees you there. He sees us there as part of the worship team. And verse 13 says, and I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessings and honor and glory and might forever and ever. We're there. We're there. It gives hope. The passage in Exodus also really does give us a glimpse of the throne room. Now, Pastor Chris explained why we do the show that the world has stolen from the church. Right? There was rumblings and lightnings. And when you look there, and the fire of God, there's smoke. There's a lot of activity around the presence of God. You know, several years ago, I went into the Mormon temple before they were building it. I don't know if you were around here at that time. So prior to commissioning the Mormon temple, they often invite outsiders to come in and take a look. This fascinates me. So I went several times because I had a lot of questions for them. But what surprised, Pastor Chris is laughing because I ask a lot of questions. What really surprised me was how silent and austere the celestial room was. And I'm like, have you even read Revelation 4 and 5? I mean, it is anything but quiet and basic quiet. I mean, we have glowing white clothing, which is the only reference to white. But aside from that, we have voices that sound like trumpets, flashes of light, thunder, emerald rainbows, crystals, gems. It's dazzling. But moving on to the tabernacle of David, you know, God hasn't stopped inviting us to worship him, to truly know him. David's understood the assignment. His greatest desire was to be able to establish a house of the Lord And later in Jerusalem, and later Jeremiah actually called Jerusalem the throne of God. He brought the ark to Jerusalem. And there was an extended delay for the journey as David had to rethink his first strategy because his first attempt ended in a mishap that ended Uzzah's life. Now, the second travel attempt was considerably longer than the first because they sacrificed oxen and sheep every 6 steps. Now, looking at this stage, we'd be stopping at least twice along here to kill an ox and a sheep. How long would that take? Now, I don't know if you're task-oriented. I'm really task-oriented. I've really struggled to understand why we would take so long to get to a destination, because for me, it's all about the destination, but the Lord is all about the journey. And as I've spent time studying in Revelation 4 and 5, sorry, can you open that? Thank you. Especially as I've prepared today, thank you so much. You know, as I prepared for today, I'm reading scripture, and then I write a response, and then I just have to stop and worship, whether it's to sing a song or move and dance, because I get to see this vision before it affects you. It affects me as I'm preparing, and I see Jesus, and I just have to worship everything he does. Because the more I know and understand, the more I stop and worship. Now, once the ark was in Jerusalem, David appointed worshipers to minister before the ark day and night. All worship, all the time, just like heaven. Which brings us to our reason to be here, raison d'être. To fully see Jesus exalted and worshiped. The first part of John's vision introduces the Father, the Ancient of Days, is seated on the throne. And we also have an introduction to the 4 creatures and the 24 elders. We see this in chapter 4. But chapter 5, everything in chapter 5 illustrates the supremacy of Jesus. I appreciated the insight that Pastor Braden brought to us last week about the 4 creatures being representative of the pinnacle of creation. The oxen is the greatest of all the domestic animals. The eagle is the greatest of the birds in the air. The lion is the greatest of the jungle, and man is the greatest of all creation. But all of them bow down before the throne and never cease worshiping. Now, I believe that there's 2 reasons why this is true. First, they have the clearest, most unobstructed view of the one who sits on the throne. They are closest. Sometimes, you just got to get closer. And they're described as having eyes all around, which means they didn't miss anything. They saw it all. So when you see what God does, it causes you to worship. Oh, give us eyes. If you have trouble worshiping, ask for the eyes to see Jesus. And unlike Pastor Braden's small town perspective, which was, remote and distant, it made him think that Montana's was fine dining. The 4 creatures have a close-up 360-degree of Jesus, of the one who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And so next, we have the 4 creatures, and then worship increases again, and now there's 24 elders. They're up and down and kneeling and bowing and falling down. It's heavenly calisthenics. Sometimes it's just offer your body as a living sacrifice, right? Pastor Braden also explained that the 24 elders, were representative of the combination of the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the Abrahamic covenant, and the 12 apostles, which we are under in the new covenant. It's a combination of both of them together, meaning it is complete. 12 is the number of government, and 212 shows the higher level of government in heaven. We know that everything on earth in our reality is a shadow of what happens in heaven, and therefore 24 represents God's governance, and worship is at its core. Then we see here the words, behold a throne. The throne represents absolute authority. And the throne is mentioned 17 times in these two chapters, 19 if you count the thrones of the 24 elders. And we see a lot happening around the throne. First, we're to behold, take notice of the throne. And then we have the words on the throne, around the throne, from the throne, before the throne, on each side of the throne, between the throne, standing in the middle of the throne, and approach the throne. All action takes place around God's throne, around his authority. And each time it is mentioned, it drives an exclamation to point of the supremacy of the one who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Now, chapter 5 begins with an action by someone other than the worshiping creatures and the 24 elders. A scroll is introduced with 7 seals, and with it, our first introduction to Jesus. An angel asks the question, who is worthy to open the scrolls? Although the text suggests that there's a search done in heaven and earth and in the underworld, it's more of a statement of a description of position and power about someone rather than a question. John weeps at the question, why? What is it about the scroll? What does John understand that we do not understand? There's some writings in the Old Testament in Ezekiel. Now, when I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. Then he spread it before me, and there was writing on the inside and the outside, and written on it were lamentations, mourning, and woe. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly, fill your stomach with this scroll that I give you. I ate, and in my mouth it was sweet like honey. That's Ezekiel. And then Daniel says, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. The scroll that we read about in Revelation 5 is the same one spoken of in Ezekiel and Daniel, and this would have been known by John. John would have understood the scroll, and the people reading the letter would have understood that this is the scroll that describes the end, and when it's open, the end is near. So all that they've been in chains for will be concluded when the seals are broken and the scroll is opened. Ezekiel said the book was full of woe, and yet when he ate the scroll, it was sweet. How can this be? How can the woe and the lamentations and mournings be sweet? Because King Jesus is on the scene. He is conquered. The kingdom of his is established, and his covenant to Abraham is fulfilled. Taking the scroll and opening the seal illustrates the supremacy of Jesus. But who is Jesus? He's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But when John looked, he saw a lamb as though it was slain. The Lion who looked like a lamb. Heaven's perspective is different. Matthew 13:14 says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. 2 weeks ago, Coach Chris encouraged us to set our eyes on things above and not on things in this world. You know, we need to see heaven's perspective for everything. Those things that make you cry, that are making you cry, that you feel overwhelmed to even continue fighting for them. Think again through these things. Look again at these things through heaven's perspective. John's world on Patmos was bleak. Christians were running for their lives. It was pure entertainment for the Romans to see Christians being torn apart by lions in the Colosseum. I'm sure they wanted to fight back with a lion of their own. Guess what? They got one. They got a lion, but he didn't look like they thought he'd look. He looked like a lamb. What's your picture of Jesus? Are you seeing and not perceiving? Do you think him to be the lamb, meek and mild, sacrificial, but not powerful? The lamb in heaven looks different than the usual lambs. He has 7 horns and 7 eyes. It's really a strange sight. Is this literally what he looks like? Or what does John mean by describing the lamb in such a way? You know, a horn represents power. And with supremacy comes power. So why is Jesus described as only having 7, where the beast later mentioned in Revelation has 10? 10 is more than 7. Does it mean that the beast prevails if even for a little, like more than Jesus, even for a little while? You know, some look at Christians' lives, you'd think that that's actually what they believe. But that's not what it means. The 7 means completeness. 7 means complete. So what John is saying, he's encouraging the people that he's writing to who are really in the midst of running for their lives. He's saying the Lamb has complete power. The Lion of Judah is worthy to open the seals. The Lion is not meek and mild. The Lion is powerful. You might see Jesus, but do you see Jesus? The conquering Lion of Judah, who looks like a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes, illustrates the supremacy of Jesus. When we truly see Jesus for who he is, our response is worship. Next, we see the 24 elders holding something in their hands, a harp in one hand and golden bowls of fragrant incense in the others. We're told that these are the prayers of the saints. These are prayers of you and me. So let's appreciate this for a moment. Our prayers, the ones that you prayed last decade, last year, or last week, those prayers are precious offerings of worship before the throne. Until this moment, this entire heavenly scene has not included us. I mean, really, like, who are we among these heavenly creatures that worship day and night? How does he take notice of it? You might feel insignificant. I do. And yet, the prayers that I've offered in the midst of pain and problems, the prayers of gratitude that I have fought for because what I wanted to do was whine and complain, those prayers are brought as worship. Those prayers are worship. If you think your prayers go unheard before the one who sits on the throne, think again, it's a worship. It's an offering of worship. It starts with the 4 creatures, and then it expands to 24. And then John says he sees the scene broadens, and there's this crescendo of worship in heaven. There's myriads and myriads of angels worship. And finally, John sees all the creatures. You and me were there. All the creatures in heaven and on earth and even in the underworld. It says every knee will bow. Every knee will bow and declare Jesus is Lord. They give blessing and honor and power and glory and might to the one who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Worship team, you can come up. Pastor Chris has been talking to us about the priorities of heaven, which are ransom, rescue, and redeem for the lost, and to revive and restore the church. That's the priority of heaven. But the priority in heaven is worship. Revelation 4 and 5 pulls back the vision that we get to see of heaven, what heavenly worship looks like. We get to emulate that. It's not something that really has to be conjured up. We don't have to feel something that we don't. We just need a picture of Jesus, and we will worship. A lion who looks like a lamb, who has complete power and authority, who is worthy to open the scroll, and who holds the end in his hands. This morning, we are in the throne room. You've seen Jesus, and it's your turn to respond to him. Whatever you want to do this morning, you have the freedom to do that. If you want to get a closer look, if you want to get out of your seat and come to the front for a better view. If you want to kneel down, bow down, or lay down, do that. If you have tears, bring them. There is so much activity around the throne. If you know me, I make worship flags. If that's a method that you like to use for worship, please, I've actually brought some worship flags from the throne room collection for you to use. If you want to dance, it's multi-sensory around the throne. Flashes of color, thunder, rainbows. To know God is to worship God, and to worship God is to know him. Who is worthy? Jesus is worthy. Let's behold him and worship together.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty.
You've just been listening to Life Transformation, a weekly podcast of life-changing messages giving you hope and purpose. If you would like prayer or more resources to a better you, connect with us on our website, sonrise.ca, or follow us on Instagram at Sonrise Church BC.